Good afternoon, everyone. So my story starts like 10,000 years ago. So 10,000 years ago, when people used to live, there was just day and night. They would wake up. There was a day when the sun would come up, and when the sun would set, they would go to sleep. And why this? Because humans are diurnal, and we don't have a vision which can see in dark. So to protect ourselves, people used to find shelter and keep themselves safe once the sun went down. And life went on for a very long time like that. Then someday, somebody discovered the power of farming, the magic of farming. And crops, as we know, have a cycle. So the concept of time changed. People started attributing time to seasons. Something grows in winters, something grows in summers. They used to wait for rains, and so on. And there was a periodicity, there was a cyclicity that came in time. For the next 4,800 years, life just went on like that. And all we knew in terms of time was that there is winters, there is summers, there is rainy season, there is autumn, and life was perfectly fine. And besides that, there was day and night. To get some specifics in place, people started working on calendars, and the concept of festivals came in place. The festivals would tell us that which crop is coming. So all the festivals, if you see around, are largely linked to farming, as we say, call them harvest festivals or sowing festivals, and so on. That's how it works. In about 14th, 15th century, the calendar started being perfected. People were able to calculate more about how the earth goes around the sun and what is the exact duration of day. And the clock was perfected. And then happened the Industrial Revolution. Till the Industrial Revolution, people were actually working only with themselves. So a potter would get up and decide that when do they want to work, how do they want to work. A carpenter would get up and decide that when do they want to. A person who would take sheep, or a shepherd who would take sheep for grazing, or cattle for grazing, or a farmer. They largely had their own freedom of deciding when they wanted to do things. But with Industrial Revolution, one thing that changed was that people had to work with machines, and these machines were powered by steam, and steam was produced in a certain quantity. And once it was produced in a boiler, it was ready, and the machine had to work. So people had to align their work or time with machines. And this was the first time in the history of humankind that time became a public concept from a personal concept. It also became a public concept because of railways, which basically meant that if 20 people had to board a train from a particular place, they didn't have a choice of when they wanted to board. It was a public concept. They had to go to a station, wait for the train, and a train would arrive at a certain time, and they would board it. So time from being very personal came into the public space, and people had to share time. People had to know that, okay, there's a common time that we are looking at. And this was done by having clocks. So the first clock towers came in place. All large towns, if you have been to Indian cities also, which were under the influence of Raj, you will find clock towers like the Big Ben that is there. So these clock towers were the way where people could figure out, okay, what time is it? Or there were sirens in factories which would tell, okay, the factory is starting, the shift is ending, and so on. Life went on. Now looking at the concept of time management. Time is a resource. We all know that. Some people call it money. Some people say time is a resource. But let's understand. So sunlight is a resource. It's energy. Water is a resource when it's flowing in a river. And there are many other resources. Electricity is a resource. What we need to understand is that, can we control these resources? Yes, we can. We can alter sunlight. We can block it. We can get more sunlight if we want. We can stop water from flowing in a river by building a dam and release it at our convenience. We can build canals and divert them. With energy, we can do that. But can we do that with time? No, we can't. Time is something which, while being a resource, is something that we cannot alter. As I am talking to you, as you are listening to this, time just passes on. Whether I stop talking or continue talking, time will continue to go. You and I have no control on the next 10 minutes that I'm going to interact with. These 10 minutes will pass, whether I do anything or not. Once we understand this, we realize that we cannot manage time. So the phrase time management is actually a misnomer. What we manage is ourselves. We manage ourselves in a given time. We can manage everything else in that time that is there. No. So if somebody has 10 hours, they cannot manage the 10 hours. They can manage the activities they do in the 10 hours. They can manage what they are planning to do in 10 hours. Once we understand this, then our idea of time management changes. No. So if we want to manage time, or let's continue calling it time management for reasons of convenience, because that's what everybody understands. So if we want to manage time, or rather if we want to manage ourselves better, we'll have to understand how we see time. We'll have to understand time. No. So time has three parameters that we understand it on. The first one is cultural. Now, when I talk of cultural, what I would mean is that there are societies which are future oriented, there are societies which are present oriented, and there are societies and cultures which are past oriented. Past oriented cultures are like cultures in India. India is a past oriented culture. China is a past oriented culture. England is a past oriented culture. And why? Because we have a very long history. We have a 5,000-year-old timeline with us. And with 5,000 years behind us, 10 days don't matter. So when we look at something, it doesn't matter to us that it'll happen tomorrow or day after or 7 days from now. The common sentences we talk to our friends is that let's meet next week. Let's do this next month. Because 1 month is not a long time for us. Whereas in a future-oriented culture, things are very, very specific. Now, these are very young countries which follow this. US is a very good example of this, less than 300 years old. And there, if they have to do something, they'll say, let's meet next Thursday, 5 p.m. They're very, very precise. They want to control. They want to control activities. They'll say, let's do this on the 17th of the month, in the second half of the day. They'll try and be as precise as possible. On the other hand, there are some cultures like France and some Latin American countries which are present oriented, which say that we have no control on the past, which has happened. We appreciate that. We also have no control on what is going to happen in future. So let's only focus on present and do what we can do today. In past oriented cultures, traditions are important. So the examples that I gave you of the countries, you will know that they're all very, very traditional countries. Things are done because they're supposed to be done. This is one thing that we need to understand. The second cultural implication is that there's a monochronic time and there's a polychronic time. Now, cultures which believe in polychronic time are the ones which believe that multiple things can be done simultaneously. Now, I'm not saying multitasking because science has proved that multitasking is a myth. But what I'm saying is that I can, at home, start cleaning my room, also start boiling eggs, and maybe sip some coffee, which I've made for myself, and listen to some music, and maybe have a chat with somebody at home, a friend or a roommate. All these things can be done simultaneously, and I can focus on one task at a time, but the other tasks will continue along. This is called a polychronic approach, whereas a monochronic approach is when I do linear tasks. So I complete one task and only then I pick up the other. And cultures which are driven by clock are monochronic. This is again Western cultures. They do one thing at a time and they're driven by clock. So they'll start a task, they'll complete it, and then they'll pick up the next task. So, their day will be like a planner. 9 a.m. this meeting, 11 a.m. that meeting, 11:30 coffee, 12 p.m. driving to some place, 12:30 meeting someone, and so on. Whereas in Indian culture, whereas in polychronic culture, I would say Mid-Eastern cultures also, people would be doing multiple things together and they're people focused. So tasks are not important. People are more important. So if I'm talking to someone and it's considered abrupt, rude to abruptly disrupt someone or stop someone. So I'll go with the flow and let things take their natural course. So we need to understand this. The next is that polychronic cultures see time as cyclical, whereas monochronic cultures see time as linear. So by cyclical, I mean that if we all go back to our childhood, a lot of times our parents used to promise us that we'll do this in the summer vacation. We'll do this around Diwali. We'll do this during Eid. We will do this around your birthday. Yeah, because these are things that happen every year. Whereas if you look in the Western world, when they're looking at a linear thing, they would talk of a specific month, specific date, and say that we will do it then. No. So we, in cyclical orientation, we look at things that happen repeatedly. No. And that's why if you see the lunar calendar, which repeats every 15 days, people are so comfortable with it in the Indian context. All of us have grown with it, the concept of Tithi. So this was the cultural orientation of time. Now, once you understand this, the second understanding of time that is required is biological understanding. Our own bodies, how do they respond to time? So as I said, before the Industrial Revolution, people could wake up anytime and do whatever they felt like, whenever they felt like. And life was just going on. But with the Industrial Revolution, things changed. And somebody found out, one of the industrialists, they found out that people get most productive after about 2 hours of waking up. And they said that then in that case, when people wake up at 7, let's start offices at 9. So that from 9 to 12, they are most productive, they are most alert, and they will be producing more than ever. And this is how somebody decided that offices should start at 9. Why do schools start at 7? We all used to crib that. Why are the youngest people in the family woken up the earliest and sent to schools, almost sleepy in the bus, whether it's winter or summer, or 7:30 is when all of us used to leave for school. The reason for that was a very simple reason, economic reason. And the reason was to avoid clogging of roads, to avoid the blocking and traffic on the road, because office goers would also leave between 8:30 and 9. And if schools were also starting at that time, then there would be too much traffic. So somebody decided that let children suffer and let them go sooner. And this is how. So schools actually start early. Research has shown that if schools start an hour late or a little later than that, then grades go up for children with the same input. So which tells you that you would have definitely scored more if your school started late. Or if some of you had the privilege of going in the afternoon school, like I went for some time. I didn't compare my grades, but I'm sure if I go back and look at my mark sheets from those years, I'm sure I probably would have scored a little more. I would have taken it easy. So the biology also says that we have a circadian rhythm, which basically means that our clock, our body clock, is aligned with the sunrise and sunset. So twice a day, our body clock is adjusted. And that's why it is said in our culture that mornings are a time when we should do, what do you call the Surya Namaskar? You should go, Surya ko jal chadhana, you go out and look at the sun, basically, you spend time in the sun. And similarly, evening time is called the time for dusk, which is called the time for Saraswati, and that's when we should not study. Now, the reason for this, they put it in religion, but the reason is very scientific, that the 20-minute period of dawn and dusk is when our eyes get adjusted and our body clock sets. And if a body clock sets, all our biological activities will be set for the day. So it's important for us to set the body clock once a day, at least, every day. If we don't do it, then there'll be fatigue which will set in. Now, to understand this more, if you wake up and look at the sun, your pupils contract because there's so much light outside when you look out of the window. And when pupils contract, there's a center in the brain which realizes that, okay, this person is seeing light now, and it triggers the release of cortisol, which is called the stress hormone. And this stress hormone is what makes us active, which says that, okay, my day has started, I need to achieve something, I need to do something. And this stress hormone makes us productive. And after about 2 hours of the release of stress hormone, we are the most alert. Now that's a trick that you have discovered. So if you wake up at 7, and the first thing you do is, instead of looking at your mobile phone, you step out and look at the sun, look at the sky, look at, not directly at the sun, but look at the bright light, natural light. Your body clock is adjusted. And by 9 o'clock, you will be most productive for the next 2 to 3 hours. And that's a secret you should stay with. The next thing we need to understand is that there's something called sleep. Now, we all think that we sleep only in the night, no, but that's not true. What happens actually is that we feel sleepy about 5 times a day. So if you look at your own self, you'll find that you feel sleepy at about 11:30 or so in the afternoon sometimes. You feel sleepy at about 3:30 or so. Then you feel sleepy at about 8 in the evening. And if you are, partying in the night, or if you are studying in the night, there's a period at about 12 midnight. When, if you can pass that midnight period, that barrier, then you can stay awake till about 3:30, 4 o'clock. But if you feel sleepy and drowsy at 12 o'clock, and then you'll just sleep off. So these periods happen after a peak performance period. So you'll have a peak alertness, and then you will feel drowsy. And then again, you'll have a peak alertness, physical alertness, and then again, you'll feel drowsy. Once you discover these cycles, you'll be able to control your time better, because you will know that when you feel drowsy and when you are at your best. So I indulge in a lot of long drives, and I know that when I'm driving for 12 hours at a stretch, doing 1,000 kilometers in a day, then I know that when do I feel drowsy. And when I know and I can predict it, then I'm going to feel drowsy in the next 30 minutes or so. Then I plan my drive accordingly. I take a break at that time. I probably, clean up the car, stretch a bit, and I manage that so that that phase of 15, 20 minutes of sleep passes away. And then I'm back to my alertness. Otherwise, it can lead to a disaster. Knowing this would really help you. Another thing that you can add to this, and these are secrets that I'm sharing with you, is that we all have triggers. These triggers trigger our alertness. So, for example, all of us, and these are 3 kinds of alertness. There is mental alertness, there's physical alertness, and there is alertness in coordination and peak when you can coordinate things. Now, these are the 3 peaks that we are looking at. So, for example, some people will feel mentally alert after having a cup of coffee. So their trigger is a cup of coffee. Some people will feel mentally alert after maybe playing a game or having a run. Some people will feel alert after having a shower. Like in my case, whenever I want to do something intense, I go and have a shower, whether it's in the afternoon or morning, whenever. But after a shower, I know that I'll be at my best. So discover that, find that out, that when are you the most alert. Once you find it out, you can actually control. Now, this is the biology. And the next is context. So far we've discussed culture. Next, we discuss the biology of time. And let's understand the context of time. By context, I mean that whether you are doing tasks alone or in a group. So if I'm supposed to do something alone, I can do it anytime. I can do it at 3 in the night. I can do it at 2 in the morning. I can do it at any time I feel like. But if I have more people involved in the activity, then my time is shared and I have to be in context with other people. Whether I'm working with people or I'm working with machines. Now, if I'm working with a machine, then I have to. So, for example, if I'm traveling, I'm working with a machine. I'm taking a flight. I'm boarding a train. That's a machine. Now, I can't decide when I want to travel. I'll have to travel when the flight goes. I'll have to travel when the Uber comes at my door. So there's a context to it also. And lastly, is it a creative pursuit or is it something which is done with time? For example, cooking. For example, some engineering experiment, some scientific thing, anything in that context. So a creative pursuit can take forever. They say that Leonardo da Vinci took about 16 years to paint Mona Lisa. So he had no compulsion of completing it. He painted whenever he felt like that. That small painting, it's not a very large painting. It took about 16 years to complete that. You could be taking years to write a book because that's a creative pursuit. But if you're cooking, you can't cook for 16 years. You'll have to cook it because otherwise it'll get charred, it'll get burnt. No. So understanding time requires 3 things, and I'll repeat that. What culture do you come from? How do you see time? Are you a past oriented? Are you polychronic? Are you seeing time as cyclical? What are the sentences that you use? No. Understand that. The second thing, what's your biology? Find out. Are you a morning person? Are you an evening person? What are your triggers? When do you feel your best? When are you most productive? Now, just because my parents call out and say, want to wake up, it's, sun has come out and you have to start working and the day is up, doesn't mean that I have to start working. I was actually surprised when I first discovered that some of the top tennis players are not morning people. And these were my heroes, Steffi Graf, Boris Becker, Stefan Edberg. Many of them were actually, people who wake up at 10 in the morning. And I was like, what? These are super athletes and they start their day at 10. So that kind of gave me some confidence that I can also do something like this. And that's how I discovered. The third thing is that what context? Because we can't manage time, but what we have to manage is ourselves and in a context. Once you understand these three things, you will be able to achieve more, accomplish more in the given time that you have. Whatever time, whatever activity that you are doing, once you understand these three things, you will be able to make the most of it. So instead of managing time, understand how you see time, and manage yourself. Thank you.